all a poem wants to do is to reflect what does it mean to be alive. And if we give ourselves to anything, to anything in the world, if we offer our attention to any of these things, how they will open up for us some understanding of what it is to be alive. It's an ever evolving, emerging, glorious practice of wonderment with everything.
Welcome to the Guest House. I'm Sean Perel.
And I'm David Keplinger.
And this season, we are exploring a term that Emily Dickinson uses to describe the essence of practice. She called it our gem tactics.
She's talking about how our spiritual, artistic, and intellectual inquiries shape the way we meet each other and move through the world.
This season, our guests from various arenas of creative mastery are going to share with us how they have refined their gem tactics and thus their engagement with life.
Thank you all for being here. Our guest today is Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer, a poet, teacher, speaker, and writing facilitator. Her poems have appeared on A Prairie Home Companion, PBS News Hour, O Magazine, American Life and Poetry, and Carnegie Hall Stage. In January 2024, she became the first poet laureate for Evermore, helping others explore grief, bereavement, wonder, and love through poetry. So let's welcome Rosemerry Wahtola Trommer to the show. Now, you and I have known each other for at least 25 years, I want to say.
It's true.
Yeah. We met in Colorado, and you came to University of Southern Colorado, what was then USC. You came to give a reading and stayed with me, and we became fast friends. And then all of these years later, we reconnected. And in the meantime, you've published many books of poems, including your most recent, The Unfolding, which has become an integral part of my own life as a poet. I read this book with a constancy, and All the Honey, which came out only 2 years before that, and a significant achievement too, which you talk about in the introduction of this book, because this book was published a year after your son chose to take his life. And we want to talk about that as much as you're comfortable talking about it today, and have you read some of the poems from both collections.
I feel privileged to be kind of invited into a conversation between old friends. Rosemerry, I had a poet crush on you, and I reached and David happened to be visiting. I said, "Have you read this woman's work?" And he's like, "In fact, she is the dearest human being you'll just ever meet." And so I feel so grateful for the ways that friends, that kindred spirits kind of can constellate, in our lives. And I hope for this conversation to be whatever feels naturally emergent in this moment.
I'm just grateful. I love what happens when poets come together and talk. It's a communion of poets is how I like to think about it. That would be our collective noun.
Well, we asked you to bring a poem with you to get our conversation started. It's a poem by someone else, and you have done that. Would you care to read the poem and say a couple words about why you chose it?
I sure will. First of all, that was a really hard assignment, friends. Like, choose one poem or a thing that you've been thinking about. Is this some piece of wisdom or advice or a poem that was hard. It could have been so many things. And this one, I think, just rose up for me. Well, I guess I even couldn't say why, but I'll introduce it by saying that Jim Tipton, the poet, was one of the first people who I met when I moved to Colorado within the first year or so. So back in 1994, who really helped me see the poetry community in a very different way, who had this kind of expansive heart, such a welcoming human who just seemed to invite the whole world into conversation. It was so generous and so warm and so sensual and so loving and playful and c good. It was good. It just felt great to be in the presence of James Tipton is his pen name, but, always I would call him Jim. And so I think part of it, this poem, is that it's a big bear hug for me, and Jim and I performed together many, many, many times. He really taught me about how do we encourage younger poets, so that I feel like I'm trying to take on his role now that I'm a little bit older and make sure that I'm always inviting younger poets to be reading with me also. Just how do we encourage people and bring them in and help them feel at home in the poetry community. So, uh, when we would read together, um he would often I'll just give you a little picture of him. He looked a lot like Santa. He was kind of a roundish, jolly, very large, barrel-chested man with shocking white hair and a big white beard, and he was somewhere between Rumi and Santa, I think, just in his a roomy personality with a Santa body. And, he had this beautiful voice and was also a beekeeper, and there's something so right about that, just to know that he had that honey somehow flowing through him. So I hear his voice as I read you this poem, which I heard him read, oh, many, many times. These awkward efforts to be alive. These awkward efforts to be alive. To wade through our own debris toward shore, toward other people. We take too seriously. Our ships wreck, and we survive. Our hearts, stolen by pirates, are not ransomed. But we cannot weep forever for these lost things. The sea, not the ship, is our mother. The waves are never clumsy. They know when to break, when to give up, when to go back.
A beautiful reading. This is the experience I had, Sean, when Rosemary came to read at my school. I remember you in the Oshiato Center giving a reading, and there was a poem where you were imitating a long step, like a long walk, and I swear your leg must have been 20 feet long as you were doing this long step, and I thought, who is this person? But you bring the poem to life. You completely embody the poem as you did this one.
Well, I feel it. I feel this poem in my whole body, not just memory of Jim reading it, but just the profound invitation of this poem.
Which is
Well, at, at the very least, at the very least, is to not take it all so seriously. Number one, and number two, to 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 be a wave, right? To know when to break, when to give up. I notice he doesn't say surrender, which is maybe a more lovely word. No, he says they know when to give up, when to go back. And just what is it? What is it to stop in our efforting and our striving and to become one with the sea again? To take away, to notice our striving to be individuated as little waves and come back to ocean. Oh, become wave, become ocean.
There's something so humble in it, like the awkward efforting of our lives, wading through the debris, like all the fancy ships we create, our constructs, our rackets, right? We create and then having to give it all back. And actually there's a practice and also a prayer in it of just to keep opening to the ocean of our experience.
What I noted from the poem, I must have read this poem years ago, but coming back to it again immediately, what I noticed is that it does what great poems do, which is to have two things to share with us, not just one thing, but two things. One of the things is that things get taken from us and they're not even ransomed.
Not even ransom. You are not getting this back.
We're not getting this back. Exactly. So that's the one thing. And that might be enough for somebody to write a poem about. Something was taken from me and it was not even ransomed. But then there's the second part, which is that the waves are not clumsy, that the waves are our mother, that the waves know exactly what to do all the time, and that we are the children of the waves, that we too can live in that way and know when to give up and when to crash and when to subsume.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it so much, and even the way that the poem is constructed, how he sort of does that, like, that whole first stanza, these awkward effort if we were gonna try and figure out what the like, if it was just a sentence,
Mm.
the basic sentence would be, "These awkward efforts to be alive we take too seriously," which is already a little bit awkward, right? It would be, "We take too seriously we take the awkward efforts to be alive too seriously,"
Yeah.
right? So that would be the sentence, so it's so convoluted the way it's actually created on the page. He's made it so awkward, this
Yeah.
sentence, and he
Yeah.
even puts all these other little, you know, "to wade through own debris, toward shore, toward other people," so we have all these, prepositional phrases in the middle of it. So just that sentence itself is so awkward and convoluted. Like we really are you have to wade through that language to get to the point. And I I kind of love that. I just love the play of that and also just how much music is in this poem. Um they like, even the music of those waves, they know when to break, when to give up, when to go back, and just that little repetition of the when to, just kind of it has that lulling, sweet quality so that we move from all that convolutedness of the opening to that just rhythmic return of the language at the end. So it's a poem that appeals to me in so many ways. I think what he's saying, but just the music of how he does that.
To me, there's a through line in your work, Rosemary, that I almost felt as like a balm over and over again, which is the experience of allowing life to live through us, of allowing life to happen. And I mean, I'm landing on lines like, when you say more truly life lived me, right? It's like this, we have our awkward efforting and we take that as far as we can. And then some way or another, we find these messages over and over again of, if I'm not doing this, somehow some greater, in this case, in this poem, the ocean, right? The waves, the rhythm, the silence, nature, time, love will do what needs to be done here, will move through me. There's such a quality, I think, a unspoken grace in that. And I wonder if there's, yeah, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I'll say in terms of the teaching itself, I feel like that's really come from years of study with my spiritual teacher, Joy Sharp, who leads satsang. This sense of being lived. What is it that's living through me? What is it? The kind of the seeing through the separate self, the small s self, and being increasingly curious about what is it? What is this life that lives through everything, right? As Dylan Thomas would say, the green fuse that.
Green fuse. I noticed that in your poems, and I thought, Dylan Thomas.
Yes, yes, it's so there, right? And that's the thing that I think you don't see until you do, right? Like in high school, did I understand anything about that green fuse? No, I thought it was a stem, like I I think that um and even in my 20s, listening to Jim read this poem that we were just talking about, did I really have any sense of what it was to to give into that kind of surrender? I really didn't. I think I'll speak for myself. I did not have any sense of it until I did, until I couldn't not know it. And and I think this is often how teachings work, how we understand something in our head. Okay, so there's something that's living through me, but I didn't have the full body experience of it truly until after my son Finn died in August of 2021. And when that happened, I did experience, like, as many people I think do, kind of a complete inability to anything. And you know, just the smallest thing to lift a glass of water to my mouth took as much energy as I had. I almost couldn't do that. It was that kind of destruction of feeling like I could anything. And so, and yet life went on, and yet life went on. And that was when I just became extremely aware in my own being how I was being lived. And there were experiences that I had then where things would happen, or I was able to say something, or forgiveness would come, or just enormous love would come through, and I was so aware of how it wasn't me, that it wasn't me that was living this life. It wasn't me making these choices, that there was something profound grace. You used the word grace, Sean, and this is, I think, the only word that I would know how to say what it was. Then I think for me now, I'm certainly not in that state anymore. I'm as a being, I'm capable of making dinner and driving to the store and teaching a class, and like there's a lot of capability now. But I think also to know what it is to be lived, you don't. I can't unknow that. I can't unknow what that is. So it is always interesting to me. Then how do I get in the way? And it's not so indifferent from writing a poem, really. I feel like when we're writing a poem in the most profoundly beautiful part of this practice, I'm aware of this other whatever it is that lives me is living through the poem, is coming through in the poem, and how do I serve that? How do I put myself in service to that? Which means of course, I'm always in the way. I am always in the way. But I also think that's not a problem. Then the practice is meeting that and finding the way to get out of the way. I like it. That is the practice. That's the
Mhm.
practice.
Mhm. Yeah, it's this, I'm here for this. Like
Yeah.
it's meeting the moment, which is really any true creative practice of like, how do we come back to, you know, my only job here is to show up
That's
and
it.
to listen deeply and to allow this life to be lived through me.
Sean, I love that you said it that way. This is my job, is to show up and listen deeply. And I almost laugh that I do laugh that we say, as writers, that we're supposed to find our voice. And I just think, oh, isn't that funny? Really, what we need to find is our ears. That's the real practice, is a listening practice.
Rosemary, would you be willing to read Still Here?
Still here. After I did not die the first minute, I lived the next minute. More truly, life lived me. More truly, the thick air, infused with lake scent and rosemary and late summer, insisted I breathe. More that the sun did not let me not see the beloveds still here. The thick green leaves of August reminded me life pushes through. There was not a half second I forgot the horror. And still, I did not die. After I lived the first day, I lived the next. Opened the door and drove the car and held close the people I love. Rain fell, and a rainbow bloomed, and the night was sleepless and long and longer. I lived the next week, the next, the next. I lived the next year, and the next. More truly, the same life that lives through mushroom, tulip, magpie, worm, eagle, gnat, that same life keeps living me, the horror no less real. And love continues to sprout like new trees after fire, slow and indisputable. All gift. What seemed gone is still here. The way light and dark and air are still here. Another day. Another year.
Masterful. Thank you. That poem is so poignant and so representative of all of your work, because since, I want to say, 2006, you undertook a practice of writing a poem a day. And it was only after Finn's death, was it 6 months or a year, that you stopped that practice and then started it up again?
7 weeks, just 7
That
weeks.
was 7 weeks. It wasn't even months, 6 months. That you continued that practice not only into the moment of this incredible loss, but beyond it, through it, and beyond it. And that witnessing of every minute of it is in this poem, but it's also in all of the poems of these two collections, especially. And you talk about how in All the Honey, your editor suggested that you produce this book, and you felt that there was no way to do it because there were poems from the before that would no way harmonize with the poems of the after. So how did that process work for you, gathering together these poems from all of the years leading up to, and then the 1 year beyond? How did you manage to carry them all in that collection?
Yeah. So when that was it was very I love this story actually because it starts with a phone call that I got from Stephen Nightingale of Samara Press. And he was like, "Hey, my partner and I were thinking we would love to do your next book." And I remember thinking, this is my life. You're calling me? Like, what? And I was like, sure, let's talk about that. So when we got together, Elizabeth had we had talked about different ideas. I said, I don't have enough distance yet from Finn's death um, to have a book all about grief. I don't feel like it's true for me to have a book that doesn't touch it because that's what's so up right now. And I had these other ideas for books, and Elizabeth said, well, what if you put the two together, just like you said? And I said, I'll think about it, which meant no, like I couldn't, couldn't even imagine it. And then about 2 weeks after that phone call, I had a vision, which I always feel like I need to preface and say that I didn't use, like, that's not that I don't think of myself usually as having visions. That feels a little, but I also don't want to pretend it didn't happen. So this is what happened. That my son and my dad, who died just 3 months after Finn, came and they carved into my bedroom wall the words, "We love you." It was in all caps. "We love you. All the honey."
Mm.
Ugh. And I knew that they had been giving me the title for the new book, and I was all day, my husband and I went Nordic skiing up on the pass, and it was dumping snow, and I just kept thinking, all the honey, like, what is this supposed to mean?" And I eventually came up with this interpretation that all the honey that's ever been made came from two things, the bitterness of the pollen that feeds the worker bees and the sweetness of the nectar, and that this is our lives. Our lives are made of the bitterness and the sweetness, and that of course, it was going to be both of these things. Of course, there was gonna I remember thinking that my main point, sticking point when Elizabeth was talking, it was like, how on earth could there be a book that had in the same spine, poems about Mr. Clean seducing me in my kitchen. There's some very fun, silly, lighthearted poems. And 2 nights after my son's death, like, how could those ever snuggle? Well, they
Mm.
do, because that is what it is to be alive. That is what it's like. We do at all times, truly, we are met by the horrific and the glorious. So it was a teaching, it was a huge teaching for me to put together the manuscript.
And the ordinary too. I mean, the Mr. Clean and the Dolly Parton poem, and all of the poems about dailiness that are sort of saying to me that the the extraordinary and the ordinary are of the same substance. That these things come to us, and that these moments that we remember as the tragedies or the glories of our lives are really an unfolding of ordinariness that have a special character to them.
David, this is exactly it, friend. And I think that this is the giant gift of a daily practice, of a daily writing practice, in which most days we are meeting the ordinary. Most days it's about cleaning the kitchen and what bird came to the feeder, and you know taking my daughter to the dentist, picking raspberries, like picking aphids off of the plants in the garden. It's very daily. So the benefit of a daily practice is that when the stakes are very low, we can reach toward both ends, right? We can reach toward what's difficult about this moment and what's beautiful in this moment. But what's really at stake is that the calendula are going to die because of the aphids. It's not that big of a deal. It's a bummer, but it's okay. And then when confronted by these more extraordinary events, the death of a loved one, the feeling of being completely overcome with love, then there's a willingness and a openness and even a longing to show up for these greater, more extraordinary moments, because we've developed a practice of, okay, this is what it is to show up with curiosity, with wonder, and open to whatever is here.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems that you think big about the small things, and you think small about the big things.
Oh, paradox.
And on the subject of thinking small, Rosemary, I wonder if you would read the poem by that title, Think Small.
Yeah. Think small. Even the smallest strand of saffron goldens the rice and lends its good and earthy bitterness to each of the 10,000 grains in the pot. My friend says she wants to make a bigger difference, doubts the effect she has. There are many ways, I think, to reach many. One is to do as the saffron crocus does. Put everything you have into just a few threads. Then trust they're potent enough to change everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that Saffron Crocus a poem? Is that what a poem does?
Isn't it just what a poem does? Right? Isn't that what we hope a poem is? Is that distillation of the day of the right? Just to take it into the threads and those little lines on a page, aren't they just those little saffron threads? For sure they are. That was about my beloved friend Sherry, who does so much good in the world. And so to hear, isn't it interesting, when the people who we know, we can see just how big, how incredible their presence is, and somehow they don't see it. But I know how I've ingested the saffron thread of Sherry and just how how profoundly stunning it is to be changed by her.
Hey friends, Sean here with an invitation to join me next September 20th to the 26th, 2026, for a contemplative yoga and meditation retreat along the breathtaking coast of County Cork, Ireland. Our setting will be Ballymaloo House, which is a world-class cooking school and country manor, and every day we will find rhythms of deep practice and nourishment and rest and rejuvenation. I hope you will join me there. All the details are at seanperel.com/Ireland. As a fan of poetry, but not like a professional poet myself, it's like coming into really feeling this kind of fibrous quality that great poetry has of there's tension, it contains tension, right? That there it is, the beauty and the horror in Rilke's words, right? Or in your work, and I want to hear more about this, Rosemerry, when you talk about the paucity of language around praise, that's like the tension of, you know, praise and grief, of sorrow and love, and how they're inextricable from each other. And in some ways, it's like these, looking into the concrete, into the details, the particular details of our day or our life or our surroundings, and finding some access of exploration of deeper understanding of how you put in one of your poems. I think it's something like the terrible wondrous truth, right? Like
Yeah.
this is the paradox in which our lives flow somehow forward.
Yeah, so much out of what you just said, Sean, right? Like, I think a lot about how important it is to have tension in a poem. In fact, I would argue, I don't think I'm the only one who would argue that a poem absolutely has to have tension. If it doesn't have tension, um, well, A, it's boring, and B, it's completely forgettable because all a poem wants to do is to reflect what does it mean to be alive. And we all know that real life is full of tension in every moment. Not always great tension, right? It could be, wonderful, 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 wonderful. Oh, not so nice. Wonderful. Like that, even that much tension can be enough. It doesn't have to be a huge tug of war inside a poem, but a poem truly needs to have tension to be in any way interesting. And I think that is every once in a while I'm like, well, what is a poem? And like I still don't really know. But one thing I do know that a journal entry would let you go on and on and on about how bad something is. But a poem wouldn't. A poem would need you to see that, yeah, it's really awful. And there's also at least one small grain of beauty or wonder or opening or possibility, even for it to not be awful, awful, awful. Or vice versa, like if it's great, 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 that's like a Hallmark card, and we're gonna throw that away too. So yes to that tension, and I'm always aware of how important that is in a poem, whether it's the tension of paradox, which would be and two opposite truths that are somehow both this happening at the same time, or just a but kind of tension, like, oh, this, but this, which is a more classic oppositional tension. Both of them, I think, lend themselves to poetry beautifully. But and the other thing that I was thinking about, that what you were saying was, um, yes to how this happens, just when we look at anything around us, and when we do this through metaphor, like with the saffron threads, right? I had no idea that that was actually what was going to come out of the saffron threads. I didn't know that's what it was about until I started writing. And for me, this is the joy of metaphor. I'm thinking of William Carlos Williams, no ideas but in things. And if we give ourselves to anything, to anything in the world, a bench or a cup or a desk or paper or a tissue. I'm just looking around me, a window. If we give ourselves, if we offer our attention to any of these things, how they will open up for us some understanding of what it is to be alive, that it's limitless what they have to offer us. And I could write how many poems about the moon? Apparently many hundreds. And yet there's always something else that shows up for me. It's just because we've just, discovered it once and gotten excited and found this meaning in it once doesn't mean we won't find something else again and again and again and again. It's a never evolving, emerging, glorious practice of wonderment with everything.
This idea that the poem is different from the journal entry is really endlessly interesting to me. And the way that you put it too, that as long as we put our attention onto what's before us, something will emerge. But there is something within whatever we cast our gaze on. It's like physics, we observe something and it begins to interact with us somehow. And I really have known that myself in my own work. And what I always think is that attention itself is an act of love. That to cast attention on anything, to truly attend to it, is an act of love. And there is the act, which is like the boat in Tipton's poem. And then there is love, which is like the ocean underneath the boat, carrying the boat. And there are some poets who are all about the act. They're all about the object that they're creating and making it beautiful and trying to show how they can handle this ocean. And then there are other poets who are about the love that emerges from the thing that we gaze upon. And that's you. You're a love poet.
Yes,
In
I
every
am. That is for sure.
and the beauty of your work, I want to say your career, but it's beyond a career. It's a way of life for you. The beauty of your way of life is that it has shown you again and again that no matter the weather, the 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 waves will carry. That no matter what the weather is, love does not change. And the thing that emerges over and over again when we bear witness and when we attend is this power, which, for lack of a better word, we're calling love or God or the self or reality. None of them are anywhere near what we're experiencing. And that's why even when you were talking about your vision, you say it in a way that's like, okay, I know visions, I know, but these things are real. That the work speaks to us in ways that, even though we're about words, is hard to describe. And you are about words. Sean even said to me when we were first talking about you, she asked, do you have a degree in linguistics? And you didn't know this from your biography, Sean, but in fact, she was right that you do have a degree in linguistics. How did
She must be a fellow linguistic nerd.
because Sean is
Of a
also a linguist.
play with words.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, and I think it's totally. I mean, my practice is totally driven by devotion to language itself, but more and more and more and more to life itself. Yeah, I think it began as play, right? I think for me, poetry was always a way to play. That was my initiation to poetry. It was Shel Silverstein. He was having such a good time, and so was I. All my little journals when I was 10, 11,
Mm.
they were just kind of goofy and rhyming and having a good time, and that never left me, right? That just joy in language, what happens when we clink these two words together, that's still always there, and I do feel like that what if and that play, that's the other part that I've been really getting lately. I've been just able to articulate it better lately. That to me, that play, the play of poetry is the other part of how epiphany arrives. That some epiphany comes when I just allow myself, I like to say, let the poem know more than I do, and I want to never know the end when I start. And if I do know the end, I invite myself, in fact, force myself to write past it. But the other way that epiphany shows up is through, well, what if, there's this kind of alliteration? What if there's this kind of repetition? What if there's this kind of a cadence? What if there's, just this kind of wonderment? What if this image comes back again? And how would it open a second time if I brought it back? So in this way, the tools of poetry themselves are what open us to the world that we could not have known if it had just been us sitting down to write what we think we know.
Mm. It's such a discovery process as
Such a
you
discovery process.
yeah. So here's a question that kind of it feels connected to poetry and craft, but also sort of more fundamentally, like how do we show up for life and the creative act of life? So like a Joad says, survival is a creative act. And I think that is true. And I also think we could find the inflection of that creativity can be a survival act also. And then this coming into what it means to be a practitioner, what it means to have practices that a commitment to returning to presence is to asking as you do in your work, like, what is grief today? Today grief is,
Mhm.
right? And to be in a conversation with our own experience. And I wonder about this with in particular with respect to grief in your own experience, and then also how you hold space for others. In okay, here's this, grief is sometimes an ambush. Grief is mysterious. Grief is revelatory. Grief is any number of things that we can point to. Grief is love. And then how do we somehow doula ourselves through our experiences of life?
Mhm. Oh, what a beautiful way to say that, Sean, to doula ourselves, right? This continual rebirthing into what is here. What is here? Who am I? Who am I now? Who am I now? Or,
Yeah.
who am I not? Who am I not? Um, yeah, I'm thinking about what you said firstly about um, this willingness to meet life as it is. And I think that part of what grief taught me so completely was just how little control I had about that. Like, I had actually zero control about how life was turning out. It could because if I could have controlled it, and believe me, I tried, um, it would have been very different. And so that kind of complete acknowledgement of I am not in charge, that I actually can't control life. Um, that's huge. That who wants to know that? Nobody wants to know that. I don't wanna know that.
Mhm.
And also the enormous gift of knowing that then what is asked of us is to show up to life exactly as it is, again and again and again and again, and poetically, how powerful it is to realize that that poems help us to do that, to see, oh, this is the frame that I had around this moment. This is how I was making meaning out of this. And guess what? It's just a frame. It's just something I made up. Oh, really? So then then it doesn't change facts. Like, facts are facts. Like, for instance, there's a tree right now outside my window. There really is. But I could look at that tree and I could think of it as something else. It's not going to change that it's a tree, but I might want to think about it like, oh, that's a protector, or that's I don't know what else I would think. But or the fact that my son died, right? That was a fact I would have changed if I could have. I didn't want that to be the fact, but relentlessly that was the fact. And so how do I notice what kinds of stories do I have around that? And one of the most profound moments of this for me, I have a poem about I'd love to share with you. It's in All the Honey. Here. It's called The Invitation. 2 nights after he died, all night I heard the same one-line story on repeat. I am the woman whose son took his life. The words felt full of self-pity, filled me with hopelessness, doom. And then a voice came, a woman's voice, just before dawn, and it gave me a new shade of truth. I am the woman who learns how to love him now that he is gone. It did not change the facts, but it changed everything about how I met the facts. Over 100 days later, 4 years later, I am still learning what it means to love him. How love is an ocean, a wildfire, a crumb. How commitment to love changes me. It changes everyone, invites us to bring our best. Love is wine, is trampoline, is an infinite song with a chorus in which I am sung. I am the woman who learns how to love him now that he is gone. May I always be learning how to love. Like a cave, like a rough-legged hawk, like a sun. And this poem I bring in for 2 reasons. One is I think about how the story I was telling about that moment was so damaging. There was one story that was so full of shame, that was so full of fear, and um, it was an ugly story that made me not want to be around. I couldn't move forward with a story like that. To shift the story, I am the woman who learns how to love him now that he's gone, was an incredible way to move forward with a legacy of love for him, the love that he had in the world, and bring that love forward. And it changed everything. And I'm just so grateful that I had that moment and that it came so quickly after his death. That I was able to see, oh, this is a path forward that I'm able to move through in a way that allows opening and porosity and generosity and love and love. And then in this poem, you mentioned how that was one of my most helpful practices as I was exploring grief after he died, and I would fill in that little sentence stem. Today grief is, although usually I was filling it in with an object, it was much more metaphorical. Today grief is an eraser. Today grief is a chair. Today grief is a earthworm. And allowing that metaphoric mystery to do its good work on me, But in this poem, it's love, right? Over and over, I'm like, what is love? And love is an ocean. Love is a wildfire. Love is a crumb. Love is a cave. I had one group of women, book club, called me once. They were like, Rosemary, what do you mean love is a cave? How is that? And I was like, what is a cave to you? Like, how could that be true? Like, this is the work of, that's what love, that's the invitation, is just to wonder into that. How is it true that love is a cave? Is it a place where we might feel safe? Is it a place where we could be hidden for some time? But is it also true that love is a sun where everything is radiant and warm and beautiful? Aren't these both true? So, yeah, that this act of how poetry allows us to frame our experience and then to see through the frame and open up to another frame and another and another. And in this way, to continue to let ourselves be driven by wonder and less by our own, I suppose, longing to control the story. How do we see through the story again and again and again and again?
Was something I wanted to ask you about. The ways that a poem is a container for a very beautiful and dangerous thing. And it allows readers a, a kind of safe distance to look closely at something that we can barely fathom, the unthinkable, the unimaginable. And to by sidling up to it, by getting closer to it, you can kind of demystify its power over you. And I have a friend who, during the LA fires, had to leave her house. She thought her house was going to burn down as she was leaving it behind her, and she had taken one book with her, and it was this book. It was All the Honey. Why did she grab All the Honey? And I think that it's because All the Honey is a book for exiles. There is a kind of there is a kind of exile that every poem is describing, a a a, a, a being sent away from the known and thrust into this place of uncertainty. Even though the stories that you're telling in these poems are stories about your life and not about hers, there was a part of her that could recognize that this is about being thrust away from
Yeah.
and about letting go to the powers that you have no control over and holding on to whatever's left. It's like the old saying that um, I am what can't be lost. What can't be lost? It's Nisargadatta. What can't be lost? That's the I am. And when we're thrust into that place of exile, what comes out is poetry. And it's the difference between a therapeutic journal entry and a poem. Like a poem is therapy for everybody, but in this mysterious way, because you have to figure out what that cave is to you. Like you're saying, of that rough-legged bird, that hawk, what is that to you? And you give us the space to do that. That's what I love about your poems so much.
Thank you.
So there is a poem about running from a burning house in All the Honey.
I mean, can you believe there actually is a poem about running from a burning house in All the Honey? Although luckily it was a dream. When living on a tiny island, it was a dream, but I tell you, everything was on fire in the house. I knew the whole island would burn, and I had to choose what to take, and I ran past the old records, and I thought, I have those songs in me. And I ran past the books, and I thought, I have those stories. And I ran past the photos and thought, those memories are already with me. So I ran, chased by flames toward the ocean, with the only thing I could really carry. This, this buoyant love. And I dove in. My hands empty could cup the water and pull through the tide. The salt water lifted me, whispered in waves. letting go is what keeps you alive. Yeah, it really is just the love. That's really all we get to carry with us is our love. And it's what carries us, the paradox. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Rosemerry. What a gift to be with you.
Thank you, dear friend.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, David.
Thank you so much for joining. If these conversations resonate for you, we'd be so grateful if you'd like, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you listen. This work is freely offered, but paid subscriptions make it possible.
You can also check out our work at davidkeplingerpoetry.com and seanperel.com. You'll find both links in the show notes. Until next time, take good care of yourselves and each other.